Well, at last. You'll be rid of me after this one. Alternative lifestyle. And, all you've heard so far is what not to eat. You must be going nuts. There's nothing left. One dear friend of mine phoned me one day and said, I've listened to everything you say. I now breathe fresh air and drink water. How long do you give me? But it's not quite that bad. There are still things to eat, and there are still things to do. So let's talk about the issue of alternative lifestyle. This pyramid looks a little bit better than the other one. Of course, those are soy eggs over there. And that is soy milk probably, or rice milk, or one of those. But there are still lots and lots of things to eat in this world that are healthy. But let me make another point. A healthy lifestyle is not just eating. A healthy lifestyle includes rest. That's a nice word. Rest. It includes sunshine. It includes exercise. It includes water. It includes much more than just eating and drinking. But let me tell you another point. You can get by without exercise, maybe for a year, maybe for 2, maybe for 10, maybe for 20, maybe for many, many. A paraplegic who can only move his head can live many, many years. You can get by without water for a very, very short period. So water is very, very important. And we have all these toxins in our body being produced all the time. And the best way to flush them out is water. So drink water, drink water, drink water. You can get by, as I said, without exercise for a while, but the body does need it. You need those endorphins and that exercise and that turnover and that metabolism increase to get your system into a healthy condition. There's another thing that you cannot do without for a very long period, and that is food. And because you eat a lot of food in your life, and I don't know how many pigs and sheep and cattle and things I've eaten in my life. I tried to calculate it once. I was horrified at how many animals have passed through my digestive system. But besides that, you have to eat. And so it is important that we look at what we eat. If you look at people like the Hunzas, for example, they are known for their longevity and their healthy lifestyles. They are largely vegan, although they're not fully vegan. They do have animal products in their diets. But their healthy lifestyle and their exercise makes them an example to humanity. And they tell me that if you go there with your girlfriend or something, you've got to watch out for these 80-year-olds. They're not dead yet. Science has found that the largest and longest ongoing study of all causes of mortality is amongst Seventh-day Adventists, and they are a group that are studied quite frequently by the scientific fraternity. In fact, the World Health Organization gave out a report, Diet, Nutrition, and the Prevention of Chronic Diseases, in which they mentioned this group in particular. And American Journal of Clinical Nutrition said that at a 21-year follow-up, studying SDAs, because they're quite interesting. They cut out alcohol and stuff like that and smoking. And you have the full spectrum. You have vegans amongst them. You have ovo-lacto-vegetarians amongst them. And you have the full catastrophe amongst them. So they are a group where you can study the diets by eliminating things like cigarettes and alcohol and things like that. So at a 21-year follow-up, those amongst SDAs whose food habits were more vegetarian had lower age-specific mortality rates than those with more omnivorous eating practices. So the more they tended to be on the vegan side, the lower was their age-specific mortality rate. So that tells us something. That's very interesting. Generally speaking, they have lower mortality rates, life expectancy of non-SDAs and SDAs. SDAs have a higher one in females and in males. And they have lower incidences of many, many diseases. For example, cancer of the digestive tract, 65% lower. And when you look at the reasons, you can see that what they are eating is basically different from the rest of society, largely on the point of meat. For example, 55% of SDAs have meat only once a week, and only 6% eat meat every single day. Interestingly, that a large proportion of SDAs, therefore 55%, are meat eaters, so not they're all vegetarian. But the rest of the populations of the world have the opposite trend. So this is the one major difference between SDAs and non-SDAs. If you look at egg consumption, it's very similar to what the rest of the population does. Milk consumption is similar, and cheese consumption is similar. So it's interesting that the meat alone gives them this advantage. And if you think that those that are more vegetarian amongst them have lower age-specific mortality rates, just think how healthy they could be if they all eliminated the animal proteins and products out of their lifestyle. Health aspects of the vegetarian diet, well, even the tabloids will tell you that vegetarians live healthier and also considerably longer. Vegetariër leben gesünder und auch bedeutend länger. They live longer lives. And lots of people have been vegetarian in the past. It's not funny anymore. You've had some clever guys who were vegetarian, like this one over here. I guess you all know him. And then you've had some intellectuals like Bernard Shaw, and some funny guys, and some musical guys, and some beautiful women have been vegetarian. And of course, the sporting world realizes that you got to go with a vegetarian lifestyle if you want to go and get somewhere. If you look at diseases of the heart, or even just blood pressure as an indicator, normal vegetarians, now these are not vegan vegetarians, just generally vegetarians, they have much lower blood pressures overall than non-vegetarians. And in men, there's actually a decline in blood pressure after 60, whereas in non-vegetarians it keeps going up. In women, the gap gets bigger and bigger. And even a small difference in blood pressure can make a difference later on as to whether you would get strokes or cardiovascular problems or anything like that. So there is a definite advantage in being vegetarian. Now, many people today are saying, yeah, but, everything is so manipulated today. You have the transgenic crops. Transgenic crops of 1998. Soybean, well, you say eat a lot of soybeans. Well, so many of them were transgenic. And then you had potatoes and other products that were also transgenic. And what were the things that were mainly put into transgenic food? Well, herbicide resistance, insect resistance, and mostly herbicide intolerance, and very, very, very small manipulation in terms of quality control. So let's just talk about that for a moment. The whole question of transgenics is a major issue today. And it is a fact that when you mess with organisms, you mess with their metabolism. You mess around with it. Now, not only plants are subjected to transgenic manipulations, the animal industry is very rife in terms of genetic manipulations. And we have transgenic animals on every level. In some countries it's banned, in other countries it is not banned. For example, transgenic pigs, where they want more meat, less fat. So they transplant, or they insert the gene for human growth hormone into the pig. So now actually what you have is an amalgam in terms of genes between a human and a pig. That's basically what you have there. And the pigs grow very large and they are very lean, but they are highly diseased. They have incredible sinus deformations, leg deformations. They cannot even walk. They are so diseased they have to be on drugs all the time to survive this ordeal of their transgenic condition. And so the animals are very diseased by the time you get them. And the metabolism, the entire energetics of the animal are affected. Now, even when they're not transgenic, like in the chicken industry, the mere selection pressure that they've put on these animals has made them very diseased in terms of their overall physiology. So transgenic and genetic manipulated and genetically selected animals are in a very, very poor condition. Now, when it comes to transgenic plants, what they do is they don't add genes to affect the entire metabolism of the plants. What they add, as you can see, is something to add resistance. So they take a particular gene, which let's say gives resistance to a particular disease or a particular toxin like Roundup or one of them, and they take it and they splice it in. So what it has is an add-on. It has something added on, but the entire metabolism is not necessarily affected. So if I have to choose, if I don't know, between a transgenic plant and a transgenic or genetically manipulated animal, where the total physiology is affected or a tray is added, which one would I choose? I would rather choose one where the tray is added. That doesn't mean that I say it's good to add these things. I don't think it is ethical at all to mess with the genes by cross-contaminating organisms at all. We have no right to play God, and we don't know what the effect is going to be. The industry, of course, goes so far as to incorporate genes for purely economic purposes. Like, for example, the terminator gene, which is added to all kinds of plant seeds these days. The terminator gene is a gene which allows the plant to grow, but when it seeds, the seeds don't produce, so that you are linked into the companies to get the seed. And that is highly unethical. That is playing God. May they be rebuked. Fact of the matter is, fortunately, there is such an outcry amongst the population groups of the world that do not want to purchase manipulated genetic material, that there is a backlash, and it seems as if legislation is now beginning to favor non-genetically manipulated foods. But the fact of the matter is, we're going to get manipulated foods unknowingly, or maybe knowingly, somewhere along the line. The choice again is that the animal one is always still worse than the plant one. Personally, if I can see it's genetic manipulated, I would rather not take it, because I don't know what the consequences are going to be. If I do not know, I'm not going to become paranoid about it. You see, I have a little habit. When I have the food on my table and I've done what I can, I say a prayer. And I say, Lord, please bless this food in Jesus' name. Amen. And then I enjoy. Otherwise, I'd be a nervous wreck. Have you noticed how many people become nervous wrecks about these things? What do I go and buy in a supermarket? Well, I go and look at whatever there is. And if I see a potato where I need a wheelbarrow to take it home, I assume that this thing is somehow manipulated. If I see a potato that looks as if the rats have gotten hold of it and it's all shriveled up and obnoxious, I assume it didn't get enough nutrients. So if I take a nice middle-sized one and I take everything that looks sort of middle of the road, then I can be relatively sure that it is not too greatly manipulated. And then if I wash it and I pray over it and I eat it, I can enjoy it. What's better, organic or the other stuff? Big problem, isn't it? Much argument. This is organically grown, this is not organically grown. And you can take this up to a level of hype where if you don't get organically grown food, you're going to die. Well, the whole population should be gone by now. It is true that some areas, there will be depletion in the ground of certain minerals. And in another area, there will be depletion of other minerals depending on the soil types that you have. So if you have the habit of only buying your vegetable from your next door neighbor, you run the risk of running shortages. If you buy from an open market, you have a better chance of getting from any which what source, and you have a better chance of having everything that you need. So I'm not really paranoid about that either. Organic is probably much better than the other, no doubt about that. But I'm not going to starve and not eat because of the hype in the world about it. So I have a simple philosophy. Do what you can and then leave the consequences to God. And choose that which seems the most healthy and the most probable to make you healthy. There are some pesticide genes that shouldn't be inserted into crops until their wider biological effects have been determined. But overall, the environmental benefits of pest-resistant crops could be immense. That's what science is saying. They have a point and they don't have a point. I don't believe in manipulation. I don't think that we have the right to do that. I believe we are allowed to select from the variety that is already there. So all the different varieties that we can get out of one type, I think that's fine. But don't start cutting out genes and putting them into the other species. Something else about plants. I took this photograph specifically. I took this in Bethlehem. I cannot imagine a more unhygienic environment. The place was absolutely filthy. And just next door was a butchery under the same circumstances. The buzz of flies was unbelievable. If you had a choice now, what would you eat? This stuff in an unhygienic environment or the stuff from the butchery in an unhygienic environment? Which one would you take? You'd still be better off with this. So, we're not living in a perfect world. In fact, we're living in an incredibly imperfect world. And we're going to be subjected to all kinds of things which are not perfect. If I choose that, which is still the least hazardous, then I'm still better off than any other way. Even grains and breads and stuff, you can buy them in an environment like that and survive. But you buy meat and animal products in an environment like that, you'll probably get violently sick. So the bottom line is, even in a manipulated world, plant products will still be better than animal products. What about the vegan vegetarian lifestyle? Well, obviously, if you're a vegan, you think you're nuts. And they will give you, if you say you are a vegan, let us leave carrots and sprigs of celery, which is extremely irritating. Now, my university knows that I am vegan. I don't prescribe it to anyone. I just give the evidence and people can grow into it or change into it or whatever. And it doesn't matter what you eat. That's fine. As long as you can look at the evidence and make decisions. And don't make any hasty decisions. Don't go home and throw everything away. That's not wise. Go and first see how you're going to replace and grow into it and develop into it. My university, when there's a function, they always have this plate with a little flag on it which says, there's a fight. And whenever I look at it, I already know what's on it. It will be a little bit of maybe asparagus, celery sticks, and stuff like that. And everybody else is getting drumsticks and, pieces of sausage. And have you noticed the difference in the noise quality? When they eat, you don't hear a thing. Just go. And when I eat mine, it goes. And everybody looks around. It's weird. Because they believe that if you are a vegan vegetarian, that's what you must look like because that's what you eat. Nutrition. Vegans, vegetarians, whole food omnivores had adequate intakes of most nutrients and were exemplars of balance, variety, and moderation in comparison with those omnivores in their sample and the general population. Also, they were more in line with current dietary recommendations for nutritional intakes than were omnivorous diets. So vegans and ovo-lactose actually fare better than the general population that eats meat. Nutrients that need to be watched, they say, when you are vegan are iron, B12, vitamin D. And you better make sure that you take lots of supplements of those. If you take dairy, what happens to your iron? People who use dairy are often more iron deficient than vegans ever are. And by the way, if you make sure that you take foods to yourself that are rich in iron, and you have a high vitamin C content in your diet, in other words, you have lots of dark green vegetables and you have lots of fruits in your diet, then the iron is not a problem. If you have problems with iron because of heavy, let's say, menstruation problems or something like that, you would have problems whether you were a vegan or a vegetarian or not. And then you would have to take some form of supplementation to help you along. Because there are more women out there with iron deficiency who are on omnivorous diets. B12 is the other problem child. B12 is produced by bacteria, not by animals. So the bacteria in a cow, for example, will produce the B12 in the forestomach, and then it'll go into the tissues, and you can get it from that. We have the same bacteria, but unfortunately, they're very low down in the intestine. And one of the reasons why is because of our acid diets. I'll come back to B12 in a moment. Vitamin D, if you live in a sunshine-poor area, like in Europe, where it's overcast 9 months of the year, well, then take a vitamin D supplement. Why not? Mineral and vitamin needs are met by variety and right choices. Make judgments on sound evidence, plan wisely, and don't be afraid. Once you have done it right, you don't have to worry. This is bacterial counts in the stomach with more alkaline environments. And you can see that if you have meat, you have very low bacterial counts because your pH is in this region in your stomach. If you have largely meals that are of plant origin, you'll be more likely in that region. And if you have, let's say, only fruits or something for supper, you can get into that region. Also in the intestine, you find that the bacterial count increases from the back to the front. But if you had a more alkaline diet, you'd have higher levels of bacteria in the front. So combination is very important. The type of food that you eat, your mouth has bacteria that produce B12. And we tend to use toothpastes that are bactericidal, that kill all the bacteria in your mouth. You don't have to kill all the bacteria in your mouth. Bad breath comes from the stomach. It doesn't come from the mouth. You can clean your mouth now. What do Africans use? They use salt or ash, and they have the most beautiful white teeth that you can imagine. They don't have caries. They don't have a problem with it. And they don't take fluoride either. So there's lots of things you can do to increase your B12 production. And by the way, you have tremendous stores of B12 in your liver, and you can last for many, many years unless there's an enzyme problem. But I see nothing wrong with using, let's say, soy products like soy milk or something that have been fortified with B12. If you're worried about it, take B12. I never worry about it. Occasionally I'll get it in because I get B12 from this and B12 from that and whatever from the products that we eat or whatever. And I had myself tested, my family tested. We've been vegans for 14 years and B12 levels are perfect. If there is a problem, take a supplement. Minerals, you need lots of varieties of minerals, so you need different plants in order to supply all of these. We need variety in our diets. They say zinc is another problem. And they say you can only get it sufficiently from animal products like beef and products like that. Legumes are pretty good on zinc. There's no problem with that. Seeds are pretty good on zinc. So oats is pretty good on zinc. Wheat germ is pretty good on zinc. You get enough from those products. And as far as the other vitamins and things are concerned, if you have enough yellow foods, if you have enough sun and grains in your diet, you will have everything that you need. I'm not saying you don't have to supplement, But supplementation for me is something that I would take when there's tremendous stress or when I'm feeling under the weather. But your diet should supply what you need. If you're pregnant, you have higher needs. So, for example, folacin, you need much more. There's lots of folacin in avocado pears, by the way. You have slightly higher protein needs, calcium needs. But you saw the African Gambian women, they got everything out of grains and legumes, and they did just fine. Let's talk about some general guidelines. You have to eat an abundance of fruits, grains, nuts, seeds, and vegetables. Legumes are also seeds. You have to eat more alkaline-forming foods than acid-forming foods. If you are a vegetarian, you've already done that. You don't even have to worry about it. And you have to avoid acid formation by choosing correct combinations of foods. 3 rules. You know, you go to some health stores and you read about combination charts. You need a calculator and a computer just to be in your kitchen. Have you noticed that? It's a nightmare. And what they tell you, what you're not allowed to eat with whatever, is frightening. Fruit and vegetables eaten together leads to acidosis and to flatulence. We'll talk about that in a moment. Meat leads to acidosis and disease. We've discussed it. Fat, we've discussed cardiovascular disease and carcinogenic. Smoked foods, stomach cancer. Refined foods will eventually cause problems and disease. Secondary compounds, we've spoken about those like caffeine and theobromine and all of those. Processed foods and additives, those are things that one can watch. Fats in the diet should be in the region of 15 to 25% fat content. So, for example, the Japanese diet traditionally had 12%. You don't want to be thin as a rake, so you might want to get up there to 20% in some cases, depending on your personal stature. Proteins, you want to have around 15 to 20%, not more, never more than that. 20% is way too high, 15 is fine. Carbohydrates should be the bulk of your diet. And then you should have more alkaline-forming foods than acid-forming foods. And that's easy to achieve because every single fruit, every single vegetable is alkaline-forming. That means that even the lemon is alkaline-forming because it depends on the minerals and not on the weak acid, citric acid, whether it is alkaline-forming or not. So high alkaline foods would be your fruits, especially dried fruits and things, any fruit, any vegetable. And high acid foods will be all the animal products. And if you don't have them in your diet, then already you are there. So you don't have to worry about it. In fact, there are even some nuts and seeds and legumes that are alkaline forming, like lima beans, navy beans, kidney beans, peas. They are alkaline forming. Nuts, the almond is alkaline forming. Chestnuts, coconut is alkaline forming. And millet is alkaline forming as a grain. Sorghum, kidney beans, snap beans, soybeans, all of those are alkaline forming. As I've told you, it's the mineral that determines whether it's alkaline forming. So acid minerals will have more of the sulfur, the silicons, the chlorines, whereas the alkaline ones will have more of the potassium, calcium, the magnesium, the iron, and the manganese. How much do I need in order to survive? Well, they've had a lot of scientific evaluations on these foods. One of the diets that in the literature is praised is the Chas rice diet, which says you need 1 portion of legume, nut, seed, or nut butter per day. That's about a half a cup of legume, or just 2 tablespoons of nuts or seeds. That's not very much. 2 portions, that's a cup or item of some fortified vegetable. Vegetables should be an important component of the diet. Fruits and grains should be the main energy source. Just briefly tell you something about little children. I'll just skip past those. We must treat little children different to adults. Little children have small stomachs. And we as adults, we tend to want them to eat like we eat. So you have a table that has, let's say, the bulk food, like the grain, legume varieties and all that sort of stuff, and the patties that you've made and all that stuff. And then you have your vegetables like the broccolis and the salads and the this and the that and the whatever's on the table, and the carrots and the whatever. And the child takes, and the mother says, no, you must have more of this, and first eat that, then you can eat that. Don't they do that? Because mothers are thinking with an adult mind. Now that little child has a smaller stomach capacity, and the vegetable and the fruit is how much water? Well, depending on what it is, could be 70, 80, 90% water. So if you force the child to eat a lot of that stuff, what are you filling him up with? Water. And a child having a small stomach capacity needs energy food, so you should say to him, he automatically will say, I want more of that. Mom, let him have a little more of that. And then make sure that he gets a little bit of the other in at least. Because a child needs energy food. If you're going to cook stuff like soft maize porridge for breakfast for the child, maize has a tremendous water-absorbing capacity. That's why they use corn flour to thicken soups and stews. Isn't that right? All right, because this sucks up the water. 6 parts to 1 part. What does rice do? How many cups water to 1 cup of rice? 1 to 2.5 about. Whereas maize or corn, as you call it here in this country, would be 1 part to 6 parts. So you don't want to have lots of water and things like that for the breakfasts of the child. So choose grains that don't absorb that much water. Bread, excellent food, because when you bake a bread, you use 1 part grain, 1 part water. Then you put it in the oven and you evaporate half that water off, so it's 1 part to only 0.5 parts, so that's a high energy food. And we'll be talking about that. Some useful equipment, you need a good blender. Really, if you want to have Western style diet, you can eat great vegan food out there in the field with a pot and nothing else and just a piece of iron to put on the fire. Wonderful vegan food. But if you are in a Western style lifestyle and you're entertaining guests, you need a good blender. Because when you're going to make sauces and nut creams and stuff like that, you don't want to have these bits floating around in your mouth. It's got to be smooth, so that blender's got to go zip, and it's got to do its job. Mustn't go nothing more irritating than that. You need a good frying pan, maybe some waterless cookware if you want, and optional would be a waffle iron, a food processor, but there's nothing wrong with a good knife. And if you want to be really into it, a nice wheat mill would be nice, because then you could make your own grains as you wanted them and add them to your breads and your goodies as you would like to do it. But you can get by without all of those things. You can bake a good whole wheat bread with a blender. Just soak the wheat and blend it, and you got it. See? No problem. What about some proper combinations? The only combinations that we really have to watch out for is not to eat fruits and vegetables at the same meal. Let me explain why. Vegetables generally are very complex carbohydrates, and they have cellulose shells, so they're very high insoluble fiber, all right? And that means that it takes longer for the stomach to digest them. Whereas fruits generally have simpler carbohydrates. The fibers in them are soluble fibers, and fruits can digest very rapidly. So you can have everything out of your stomach in 3 hours, whereas the vegetables might take longer. You might take up to 5 hours. And grains, they don't have as much of the insoluble fiber on the inside particularly. So barley, buckwheat, bulgur, any grain, any legume, any nut, seed, vegetable digests relatively quickly, because the protein type, plant protein, cuts up very quickly. So the difference in time here is never more than an hour, and the difference in time with that combination is never more than an hour. So you can eat vegetables with grains, legumes, and etc., and you can eat grains, legumes, and nuts and seeds, etc., with fruits. But as soon as you add those two together, the fruits and the vegetables, the time difference becomes too great, and the stuff on the left, the fruits, start fermenting. And then you get fatty acids rather than sugar. Do you understand that? So the end product is acid forming. So you can prevent acid formation by just ensuring that. I know it's very popular to have a vegetable meal followed by a dessert of fruit, but it's not a very good idea. So you could eat, for example, let me give you an example. Let's say you want a burger. You take a roll, a burger roll, and you make a patty out of whatever you want to make it out of legumes and grains and stuff and things that you mix in there, and it all comes out of that central category over there. And then you can put on there a Thousand Islands dressing, which you've made with cashew nut cream, and you've added a little bit of tomato something and a little bit of lemon juice and a little bit of something sweet, and you've got a great sauce. You pour that over there. You eat a lettuce leaf, which is 99% water, so it falls in the neutral category. And you could put a slice of tomato on there, which is also 99% water, falls in the neutral category. Put that on top of it, and you can have fruit salad with it. Does that make sense? All right? Or you could have the same type of thing and add onions and fries and stuff like that that you've made in a healthy way, and you can eat it with vegetables. And then if you want a dessert, then you could have something that's made from grains, a nice little cookie or whatever, something like that, or a bread pudding or something like that. So the neutrals are things that have not got the heavy fiber walls yet, so sprouts will still count neutral. Avocado has oil in it, so it's slightly longer to digest than fruit, but not as long as vegetables, falls in the middle category, and anything that's very high in water content, like cucumbers or something, could be classified as neutral. And then also you would like a grain-protein combination, grain-legume combination, somewhere within a 24-hour period. A simple peanut butter sandwich will be a perfect protein. It's grain-legume combination. If you have a slice of bread in the morning, and in the afternoon you have a meal with, let's say, rice and legumes or something, you've got an absolutely perfect protein for that day. So there's no need to panic. So a diet that contains grains, nuts, seeds, fruits, and vegetable will supply a superb blend of all the proteins that you need. And that's the African diet, remember, of grain, legume, is absolutely perfect. And here's nice vegetables and things. Another thing to note, you need a whole food diet. We spoke about refined foods. I'm just reiterating this. Refined foods will give you glucose surges. If you have a whole food diet, that doesn't mean you have to eat a clunk of nuts on your table. Click, and a clunk of that, and a clunk of that. You can cook with it. You can put it in the blender. You can make a sauce. You can make a pudding. You can make all kinds of stuff. We'll talk about it in a moment. And you can utilize it in such a way that it makes good, palatable, nice food. But refined food is a problem. So don't refine it, use it. If you're fed up with healthful living, eat some refined food. That's what I said. But don't make it your lifestyle. So think whole food. That's how they live in the Mediterranean areas. You go and buy it in the whole form. And that's great. Start thinking about granolas and mueslis and stuff like that. All of that is whole food. You can have great fun. And you know what? We are so scared of variety. If I give my kid 10 toys for his birthday, and then he takes the 10 toys, throws 9 away, takes the 10th one, smashes it into 3 pieces, and plays with the wheels and the steering wheels and with the chassis. What's the chances that I'll give him 10 toys for his next birthday? None. But that's exactly what we do. God gives us a tremendous bounty of food and fruits and stuff. We throw it all away. We take the banana and the apple, and that's it. And then we take the grain and we say, smash! And we make wheat germ and endosperm and bran on the outside. And then we play with one of them. How does he feel? So variety is the name to go. By the way, in this picture over here, what is alkaline forming? Everything. Let's have a look at a little shopping list. So when you think about what must I have in my house? Well, let's think grains. Well, what can I use barley for? Well, barley is very rich in B5, promotes fat metabolism. I can add it to rice. I can make a rice that has a little bit of barley component. I can add it to soups. I can add it to whatever. In the winter with its high B5, it'll promote heat production in your body. Great. Corn, I can eat corn in the cob. I can make corn chowder. I can make corn soup. I can make corn this, corn that. Lots of things you can do with corn. All these different grains. I can use oats. I can make an oats porridge. I can make a muesli. I can make a granola. I can make great variety. The more dried it is, the better it is. By the way, oats is the #1 digestive food. So if you're sick, if you're old, if you're young, that's the type of stuff, and it's rich in fiber, soluble fiber. Great stuff for kids to give them long energy because it holds onto the sugar and releases it slowly through the digestive period. Millet. You can start making things with millet that'll boggle the mind. It's a wonder food. You can replace eggs with patties. You can bind things. It's very high in iron. So there's a high iron food. It's an alkaline forming grain. So if you have old bones and bone joint problems, great stuff. High in lecithin. You can add it to breads, what have you. You can make spreads. Just take a little bit of cooked millet, dehusked, of course. In some countries, they buy the bird seed, and then they have a chewing experience par excellence. No. You've got to have the dehusked variety. Cook it like rice, put it in a blender, salt, a little bit of turmeric, blend a little bit of whatever with it, some whatever, and you have a great spread. And instead of butter, use millet spreads or cashew spreads or any one of those. Oats is high in phosphorus, has good combination of fats in it, lowers your cholesterol level. It's the second best grain protein. Rye, start adding a little bit of rye flour to your breads. You know, that's why Germans are so strong. Very rich in B1, B2, B3. Get away from the idea that grains are boring. Grains are exciting. Start making things like mueslis, and you don't have to have lots of oil and things. You combine it with different things like rolled oats, chopped nuts, raisins, pumpkin seeds, chopped dried fruit, shredded coconut, sunflower seeds, sesame seeds. You can mix all this stuff together and blend some of it, and then you can make a great muesli. Or a granola, if you want to bind it, you can bind it with a banana, some chopped dates, and put all this stuff together, oats, sunflower seeds, coconut seeds, chopped nuts, the ripe bananas, and the chopped dates, the salt, the hot water, and the natural vanilla will bind it and make it nice and crispy. You can have great fun with grains. Rice. You can have white rice occasionally. There's nothing wrong with having white rice. But brown rice has none of the destruction that the white rice has. White rice has 80% of the B1 destroyed, 40% of the B2, and 60% of the B3. If you want to get the rice nice and fluffy, then soak it the night before, then cook it, and it sort of pops up like that. You can do funny things with brown rice. And now let's talk bread. Today, people are going nuts with wheat allergies and gluten allergies and this allergies and that allergies. And they say, don't eat bread. Have you heard that one before? Okay. You know what? If I read my Bible correctly, it says Jesus was born in Bethlehem, which means the bread basket. He calls himself the bread of life. He broke the bread to his disciples. He fed the masses on bread. Bread is the staple that has kept the nations alive for thousands of years. And I want to tell you that bread is probably one of the best foods in the world. There is a lot of religion in a good bread. Some of you might recognize that. It's a high energy food, excellent primary nutrient combination. It's mineral rich. And if you have too much refined, it leads to the same other problems that you have. If you have a good stone ground flour, you can make great bread. You don't always have to have refined bread. I mean, you don't always have to have whole wheat bread. But you want nice, light bread. It doesn't have to be so fluffy that you can push the whole thing together and you get nothing out of it. The more grains you add to a bread, the denser it becomes. So, but you can add a little bit. Barley if you add that to bread, it makes it mushy. So you want to have a bread that's simple. Now, most people are afraid of baking bread. And you don't have to be afraid of baking bread. It's very easy. And a simple whole wheat bread, for example, you take 1 kilogram stone ground flour, it's about 2 pounds probably, 2 pounds something, and you add 1 packet of active yeast and a little bit of salt, and then you need something sweet to make the yeast go. So you can either take a little bit of sugar, or you could take a little bit of honey, or you could take a little bit of molasses, or you could take some fruit. You could blend an apple, or you could blend some raisins just to give the sugar component, and then you can add that in there, and then you start mixing. The trick is to get the gooiness, the gluten, to develop. Now, you see, what people do is they mix it, and then they let it rise, and then they bake it, and then the gas, the CO2, escapes through the dough, and it goes perfectly flat, and you can kill your husband with it or build houses. Have you noticed that? You want that gooiness to develop, that it's like chewing gum, so that when you put your spoon in it, the whole thing comes up, and it goes like that. Then when you bake it, the gas gets trapped in there, and it makes a perfect bread. And this is so simple. You see, today we have the notion that you must have a fully balanced meal in a bread. Where does it say that? You need bread to be part of a fully balanced meal. Does that make sense? If you go to a health shop sometimes today and you buy a health loaf, you need a wheelbarrow to take the thing home. It doesn't have to be that heavy. So it's not too difficult to build and to bake a healthy bread. So here is a bread that on the left over there, which is a little denser, which has some rye in it. And there is one without rye. You can use partly refined to make it even lighter. And you can have a good bread, and that can form a great part of your diet. Now let's get to the nitty-gritty. Legumes. There are so many legumes on the market. Carrot beans, chickpeas, kidney beans, lentils, lima beans, you name it. But beans have led to many a divorce. Have you noticed that? Let me explain this to you. Beans are dormant seeds. Just like grains are dormant seeds. Grains, for example, especially wheat and other grains, contain enzyme suppressants. And the reason why they contain enzyme suppressants is to keep that seed dormant. How long can you keep a seed in a barn and then still grow it? Sometimes years, and it'll still grow, right? Now, it's dehydrated, that's one thing, but it's also packed with these enzyme suppressants. It's got tannins and glycosides and alkaloids and saponins and all that stuff right in there. So this legume, being a big seed, has a lot of enzyme suppressants. Does that make sense? All right. Now you soak it in enough water, and the next morning it has absorbed all the water. And the legume is nice and round. How much of this stuff have you gotten rid of? None. None. It's all soaked up in the beans. Now you cook it, and you make it nice and soft, and you serve it. So you're getting all these enzyme suppressants into your intestine, and your enzymes are suppressed. So most of the legume doesn't digest properly, goes through to your lower intestine, into the colon, where there are bacteria who can break down these components and then digest it by fermentation, making for a very explosive experience. Have you noticed that? And then you have the dear people who soak in more water, and they see that the liquid that has come out is nicely discolored, is brown. What a delightful base for a soup. So they make a soup which has a legume base, which is also very noisy. So what's the solution to the legume problem? The solution is you have to simulate what happens in the plant when it germinates. So when you want to plant a seed, it rains, it swells up, it rains again, the stuff leaches out, and eventually all the components are gone. And when they are gone, that seed sprouts. So those are the two things you can do. You soak your legumes in lots of water. Then you come there and you see that the water is brown from all the tannins and the saponins and the glycosides and the stuff that come out. What do you do with that water? Aha! You throw it away. Then you put more water on and you do the same thing. And you put water on again and you will even see that it starts making little bubbles. Now, if you don't change the water, it will rot and it will stink. So you change the water regularly. You can soak the bigger legumes for 3 days. Now, of course, who wants to hang around for 3 days to eat? There's not much point in that, right? So you do that with a large quantity, put it into freezer bags, pop it in the freezer, and your job's done. But when you're hungry, you take out ready soaked frozen beans, put them in the blender or whatever you want to do with them, and voila. I guarantee even out of the freezer, they'll still grow. They'll be fine. So that will solve the problem. And remember, it's also a rich protein, and you don't want to make heavy legume dishes. The grains should always be 2/3 to the legume 1/3. So you can make stews and things or soups that contain the legumes, but also have carrots and other stuff in it and vegetables. And don't make it too concentrated because you cannot digest all of that. So you can have tremendous fun with legumes. You can make sauces with legumes. You can do great things with legumes. The chickpea up there. If you have soaked chickpeas, and you take them out of the freezer, they've been soaked already, they're nice and ready. Especially people with sensitive intestines should soak and soak and soak. Even the humble lentil should be soaked for people with sensitive intestines because they too can give you competition for the gas factories. Now, something like the chickpea. You can take the chickpea, you can put it into a blender, add some water, blend it, and take the liquid and put it in a saucepan, cook it, and it will go thick automatically by itself. Magic. All magic. Add some lemon juice, a little touch of something sweet, and you have a mayonnaise. Then you make a potato salad with a chickpea dressing. Then you have a legume plus all that carbohydrate. Great stuff. You can have great fun with legumes. The soybean is one of the most potent legumes in the world. It has 20 times more calcium than beef or eggs, 10 times more potassium than beef or eggs, 3 times more phosphorus, and 5 times more iron than even cheese, and twice as much as meat and eggs. It is a wonder food. If you look at the chart, which you can't see, of course, you will see that comparatively, the soybean gives you just about everything. And even refined or partly refined, like tofu or one of those, is still better than nothing at all. You can use tofu to make mayonnaises that are absolutely dreams. 2 cups tofu, a little bit of water, onion salt, garlic powder if you like, lemon juice, honey or raw sugar to taste, and then blend the ingredients and voila, you have a mayonnaise that is delightful. None of those millions of eggs in it, with all that cholesterol, none of that partly hydrogenated oil in it and all that heavy stuff. It's light, you can eat it, you can enjoy it. Tofu omelet is terrific. Half a cup tofu, a little bit of rice flour, a little bit of cashews, blended up together, water, salt, onion powder, cloves of garlic, turmeric, medium carrot, etc. Just for a little slice of carrot or a little bit of turmeric just to make it yellow. Smear your pan nicely with a little bit of olive oil or lecithin or something like that. Make the first one, it'll break, give it to the wife. The second one is perfect. It'll come loose very nicely. Put your favorite filling in, whatever that is. Make yourself some fries the healthy way with olive oil into the oven. Beautiful salad with it. Voila. It's a tremendous meal. You can have fun being a vegan, playing around with things like tofu. You can make cheesecakes. You can make waffles. You can make quiches. all kinds of things. You just need a little bit of nuts and things like that. People say, but that is expensive. Have you heard that one before? Let's just run this chicken by you. How much is a chicken per pound? Is it about $1 a pound? Can we say that for argument's sake? Let's say, you said a chicken weighs what, 3 pounds? And you said it's about $3, so that makes it about $1 a pound, right? Okay. How much of that chicken is bone? Well, more than half. So already it's $2 per pound, right? Okay. Of the meat that you're taking off, how much is water? 70% is water. So how much is your chicken costing you? At least $5, $6 a pound. At least. Nuts are cheaper. Especially if you buy broken nuts, and if you're going to put them in a blender, you might as well do it, right? So you can make quiches and wonderful things with cashews and tofu and lemon juice and a little bit of onions and onion powder and oregano and basil and cloves and put it in the oven and voila. You can make, well, you know what the Mexicans do with beans. Of course, they sometimes forget the soaking bit. So they tend to levitate at night. Sprouts. You know what? When you sprout something, it's like simulating germination. And that brings me to the whole question of raw food. Sprouts are excellent foods because they give you live enzymes. The early release of enzymes in this is very high. So you have lipases and things like that which help you with your digestion, especially older people that get more and more problems with digestion. They would benefit from sprouts. Some raw foods are in fact very hard to digest. Like potatoes, and the starch in potatoes is easier to digest once it has been cooked. The components of grain are much easier to digest once they have been cooked. So, or sprouted. So you would want to, in some cases, have raw foods. If you have a lot of fruit in your diets, by the way, those who partake largely of fruit will receive a special blessing. Quote. Now, if you have a lot of fruit in your diet, is that raw food, yes or no? Yes. If you have salads and things in your diets, is that raw food? Yes. But you don't have to go overboard and have everything raw. I'd hate to eat potatoes raw. In fact, I refuse to eat them raw. There are some things which need cooking to make them more digestible, especially of the vegetable variety. So raw is good, but we don't have to go overboard. We don't have to go overboard. In fact, if you do go overboard, some of it actually is quite hard to digest, and it becomes problematic if you have too much of it. So just remain balanced. Mung beans and things like that are great for making sprouts. And carob. Now, I know that there are various varieties of carobs. In Europe, the carob is disgusting because it's half bitter. In Africa, the carob is delightfully sweet. And if you use a little bit with soy milk, you can make those drinks for the evening. We try this with the young people. They come to us every Friday evening, a whole horde of them. And we always have this carob drink. And in the beginning, they think, this might taste funny, but they all love it. So you can make great drinks, and you can make chocolate substitutes and things like that. Chocolate substitute sauces using carob, using dates and a little bit of water, honey or brown sugar, carob powder, a little bit of natural vanilla. Blend the stuff together and cook it together for a little while, and voila, you have it. Lentils we've already spoken about. You can make all kinds of things like mock leberwurst and savory spreads. Let's talk about nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds are great for making sauces and cooking with. And you don't want to use too much, but if you make a sauce with it, you know, it doesn't have that much nut in it. You can also use seeds to do the same thing. So there are some great nuts that you can look at. Even the coconut, although it is saturated fat in there, it doesn't have the cholesterol raising components. And nations that consume a lot of coconut are extremely healthy. So for some reason, although it is a saturated one, it doesn't act the same as that from animal sources. So the components are slightly different. Nut mayonnaises, cashews, water, garlic powder, onion, salt, juice of a lemon, honey or something with it, blended, and you have a great sauce for a mayonnaise. Or you could pour it over a pizza, pop it in the oven, and delightful. Lasagnas you can make. All kinds of interesting things with these nut creams. So you make your layers, you pour the nut cream over it, you make the next layer, you pour nut cream over it, you put your tomato stuff in between, nut cream, and then into the oven, bake it. Wow, really potent stuff. Seeds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, start using them in your granolas and your things like that. Fruits and vegetables. We must eat a lot of fruit. It's the most easy thing to digest. Remember, little children, don't fill them up with fruit alone in the morning. That won't be enough for them. They want their power food, and then give them fruit as well. And there are many, many fruits on the market. I don't know whether you know it, but there are apples and apricots and avocados and bananas and berries and cherries and carrots and dates and figs and grapes and lemons and all kinds of things. But the Western world thinks that there are only bananas and apples. Have you noticed that? That's what they eat. They eat bananas and apples. There are also melons and olives and papayas and oranges and pears and pineapples and plums and prunes and all kinds of fruits. Why play with two toys if God has given us lots of toys? He's going to ask you one day, didn't you like my toys, or what's the matter? Can you see all these interesting things over here? Wow. You can have such fun with fruit. Unbelievable stuff. And you know what? If it's out of season, if it's canned, or if it's preserved, made palatable with a little bit of sugar, that's fine. Better than no fruit. We don't have to go crazy. Vegetables, you should know by now why you need them. Why do you need vegetables? Because they are cleansers, they are anti-carcinogenic, they contain all those compounds we spoke about. They contain elemental sulfur, not sulfate, elemental sulfur, which is a cleanser. You can see cauliflower has it and cabbage has it, and some of them have excellent sources of vitamins and minerals. So you want your dark green things and all these different varieties so that you can get all the minerals and components that you need. And vegetables are not just one or two. There are lots of varieties. These are the anti-cancer foods. Remember them? Garlic, cabbage, licorice, soybean, ginger, and the carrot family, celery, parsnips. The medium ones, the onions, the herb teas, the turmerics, the citrus, whole wheat, the tomato, eggplant, peppers, all the rest of the cabbage family like Brussels sprouts and stuff. And then all your grains and oreganoms and rosemary and herbs. Those are your anti-cancer foods. You want to have them on a regular basis in your diet to make sure you cleanse up your body and protect your body with antioxidants. So don't mix the vegetables and the fruits at the same meal, but have them in the day. For breakfast, start off, if you can, with a good grain component with most of the grains that you need. And then together with that, have fruit and fruit and fruit. You can also have a soy shake or something like that to get the legume component in there. For lunch or whatever, have a good cooked meal with all the vegetables and goodies that you need. And for supper, have a slice of toast and some fruit. You could put some avo on there if you like, and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And I have written a book about it, and it is also in German. Unfortunately, it's published by a scientific publisher, which means that it costs scientific prices. And I don't make anything out of it, really, because most of what I make out of what comes out of this one in royalties goes to pay for that one that was printed by ourselves until it was printed by this one. So there's no money in it, but it has a lot of information, a lot of science. And you know what? I don't want to prescribe to you how to eat. Discover it for yourself. Read the recipe books. You have so many varieties here. You have Mexicans, and you have Indians, and you have Eastern foods, and you have all those things. Between all of those, you can discover culinary delights like you cannot believe. And a vegan lifestyle can be great fun and taste great. God bless you. Go for it. Thank you.
Questions and answers.